So welcome, Perennial Pride listeners. I'm super excited to have a great guest with me today. I think you're going to get a lot of useful and insightful pieces of information from our guest, Erika Baldino, who is the Vice President of Business Development at Kensington Vanguard National Land Services, LLC. And depending on what your take is on royalty, she has a great title, the Title Queen. I don't know how we got to talk about where this comes from, but I am honored. In all seriousness, I was introduced to Erika through a mutual friend of ours, and the moment I got this chat with her, I said, "Wow, this is someone that I got to get to know a little better." She's got tons of great reviews and recommendations from people she's worked with. So really excited to have you on as a guest today, Erika.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's awesome. So, Erika, why don't we start off a little bit? I know we have some common sort of threads in our background being, biology type folks, but somehow you landed in the world of title insurance and real estate and love to kind of just get a little bit of a quick synopsis of kind of your background and kind of how you got to where you are.
So for anybody that actually looks at my LinkedIn and scrolls down 10 years, they'll note that I was an environmental chemist for the state of New Jersey on the Hackensack River. And I always get questions about that. I was a biochemist for a couple of years, overworked and underpaid, super smart, but it was not as fulfilling as I thought it would be. And I wanted to go into sales. I have a great personality. I love people. I love selling. I love cold calling, all of those things that most people say they hate. I love that. And I thought a natural progression would be to go into pharmaceutical sales. And nobody would hire me. I couldn't even get a face-to-face interview. I guess my resume was too nerdy. I was published. I had done a lot for the state. I had done a lot specifically for the New Jersey Meadowlands Commission. And I guess on paper, it didn't look like I could sell. So I got kind of defeated, and somebody said, "You need sales experience. You should go sell for 3 years, anything. It could be solar panels. It could be Tupperware. Go sell something for 3 years and then try again, and you'll be a great fit." So somebody told me about a job for title insurance. So I went into it with a typical science background. I did research. I wanted to understand title. I wanted to make sure I knew what I was talking about. I wanted to understand market conditions. And I kind of took off. And then 3 years into it, I was like, I'm not looking back. I've already built a book. That's kind of like Sales 101 at the end of 3 years. If you haven't sort of hit your takeoff or your ramp off, like you're kind of dead in the water. And I was taking flight at that time. So I never looked back and I never went into pharmaceutical sales.
Wow. And when you first got introduced to the title insurance space, did you know anything about it?
No, my mom thought I was going to sell cars because she thought it had to do with car title. And I still get asked that by consumers. They're like, "Oh, like title for car title?" And I'm like, "No, real estate title insurance." I knew nothing about it. I didn't know it existed. And most consumers that aren't in real estate don't know about it because it's one of those things where you're required to pay if you have a lender and somebody kind of just picks for you. There's no, I tell people there's no stadiums that are owned by title insurance companies. There's no billboards. There's no direct to consumer advertising. There's no commercials. Somebody will pick it for you and you'll kind of just pay the provider. So no, I knew nothing about what I was doing.
No, that's crazy. And as we know in this country with home ownership, even though it's diminished a little bit over the years, it's still a significant piece of people's assets, right? Homes, buying their homes, whether they're personal residence or rental real estate, whatever, it's such a big part of it. And to ensure, protect against ownership of it, you would think would be pretty important for people, right? This is what title insurance helps to do.
For the average American, real estate acts as their savings account. Most Americans have a house equity and a 401k, and that's it. So you have to make sure that you are the record owner. You have to make sure that there's no outstanding liens and judgments. Or God forbid you go to sell and something major is on title that you have to pay off. It could really be a lot of damage to you financially.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, we take a lot of stuff I think we could easily take for granted. And we want to trust people, right? I mean, I think that what people do, but they never look under the hood. So explain to me what for our listeners here, what is title insurance? Like, what's it really protecting against?
Sure. So I kind of coined this phrase myself to kind of explain it to people. Title insurance is the only insurance that insures the past and not the future. So most insurances out there whether it be life insurance, it insures you in case you die in the future, right? Medical insurance in case you get insurance on your phone in case you break it. But title insurance goes backwards. So what we're insuring is if anything has happened in the past that you aren't aware about before you take ownership of the property, if that comes to light or those skeletons come out of the closet, that insurance is triggered so that will protect you from any of that.
Wow. So what are some things that really, like when you, what would people find? Like, what are some things that really could be really impactful that you might?
Okay, so we had one recently. So and home equity lines of credit are going to be the new buzzword, or are already the new buzzword as interest rates rise. But people still may have some equity in their home. They may take out what's called a second mortgage or a home equity line of credit, or a HELOC as we use this. When somebody that had the HELOC goes to sell, title insurance companies kind of get nervous about them because the HELOC has to be able to freeze first, and they aren't allowed to spend any more money on the HELOC. And then we shut it off a record. So one of my underwriters had recently given a seminar that said an agency had allowed the sale to go through. They did not close out the HELOC. They said they paid it down, but they didn't close it on record. So the HELOC remained open. So now you have a new buyer with a first mortgage, but in front of that mortgage is this HELOC from the prior owner that's still open. HELOCs sometimes they have checkbooks, or they have like credit cards that you could just use and spend the equity of the home. So I guess the old owner decided to try his card by accident on a whim and realized it still worked. So he spent $100,000 on this card, swiping it willy-nilly, buying whatever he needed, thinking like it's never going to catch up to him. Nobody's going to catch this guy. He thought he was like getting it over on the man. And so the buyer had no idea. The buyer, they're not getting statements. They're not opening mail. Like they had no idea. So they went to go refinance, and the title company on the refinance was like, there's a mortgage in front of you guys. There's a prior owner HELOC. We need a discharge for that. Okay, so that's normal course. Sometimes people forget to close it out. Went for the discharge, and the bank was like, yeah, there's $100,000 still outstanding. So the new buyers were told basically they couldn't refinance until they paid this guy's debt. So obviously the new buyers don't want to pay this guy's debt off. So what they have to do is they have to file a title claim. And then through the claim, their owner's policy will kick in to provide them an attorney to then fight and figure out whose responsibility is this? Was the title company negligent for not filing a discharge and not closing it out? Can the title company go after that consumer for fraudulently spending money that he knew wasn't his? So that's kind of an example of a title claim and how it could affect somebody. In the meantime, there's damages, right? That person wasn't allowed to refinance. What if the interest rates shot up during that time? What if there was other debt that they were trying to pull out? What if they were trying to pay for a college education? Now they have to take out student loans. Like there's collateral damage that happens. And that's from a weak title company that did do best practices.
Right. So this is where you guys come in the process of the buying and selling to check all of this stuff, to kind of look backwards and just make sure things are clean so that people are taking ownership over property. They know what they're getting into.
Right. The most important part of buying a house is receiving your title insurance policy. And in some states, that could take months after it closes and nobody follows up on it. So that's really your backbone. Is you should make sure you should have a copy of your deed or even the original deed, but it's actually not so important because it's recorded in the county and it's public record and everybody can see it. What's most important is that title policy that you pay for. That's kind of like your protection to be able to move forward and be okay.
That's great. Listen, this is in our world, and in the Prio Pride sort of philosophy is protection is part of your base foundation of your wealth building, right? But if you don't have these protections on all those types of things, your assets are potentially in jeopardy, and that will definitely stunt your ability to grow wealth. Certainly,
I've done thousands of transactions in my lifetime. I did over $2 billion in real estate last year alone, and of all of those that I've done in my 10-year career, with cash deals, you can waive title insurance. It's not required. Title is just required by a lender. So all of those files that I've done, I've only had 2 cash purchasers waive title insurance. And I'm super judgmental. I think that that's one of the dumbest things you could do is waive this insurance. It's almost like owning a home outright and then waiving homeowners insurance, right? Some people do that. They do the, nothing will happen. I own it outright now. What's the worst? I'd rather save $3,000 and then God forbid they're the ones that get hit with something bad. It's the same thing with title insurance. So I had two people waive them, and the attorneys don't want to represent you. We make you sign a ton of disclosures. I actually went to the closing table to convince the guy to get insurance, and his wife was like doing the nudge, like maybe she's right. And the husband was like, absolutely not. We're not paying for this. It's a waste of money. At the end of the day, like all insurance, I tell people you don't know what you don't know. So sure, do 99% of people, consumers, they've never heard of a title claim, right? But when something happens and it's massive and it's against a house that's $1 million that you may not own, like that's a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a, typical, obviously sort of thought process with insurance. It's very short-term focused for what's coming out of my pocket now versus what potential is and the potential massive impact it could have in all different ways. So it's a thing we always struggle with, and I share that with clients all the time. And it's one of those things that, in the near term, we can get so enamored with kind of what's coming out of my pocket today and not even think about what it could really mean in terms of significant loss.
Because we're an industry that the consumer knows very little about, but has to pay for, right? We are very closely monitored by the government and by politicians. And there is one side of the aisle that feels that title insurance is a scam and, shouldn't need to be redone every 2 years. And that if title companies would just do their job correctly the first time, you wouldn't need it continuously, which is 50% right. The other 50% that is missing in that argument is that we also protect against fraud. And fraud is not something that, even the best title company can sign a fetter out in a deal. I had a deal once that resulted in a title claim, and I take a ton of pride in what we do and the due diligence we do. And no one could have known that there was a fraudulent deed file. It was a husband was being deeded off a property to kind of evade $3 million judgments. So when that claim kicked in, because that creditor wanted the money that we didn't know was outstanding, we were clean as a whistle, but our underwriters still paid out because that's fraud. And that's part of what we cover. It's not just negligence, right? The HELOC story, it's not just, well, that was an idiot title company. They should have known better. That's 50% of it. The other 50% is the fraud that can happen. And there's a ton of fraud that happens in real estate.
Yeah, that's great. So people, listeners, don't discount the title insurance you got with your properties, right? And they're there. Keep that information because you may someday need it. And it's really good that you have it. And hopefully, you have a better appreciation for the power and protection it provides for your probably likely number one asset from a physical standpoint. I certainly talked to Erika about us as personally our number one asset, but what people will say their house is probably number one in terms of what they physically own for their lives. So, I want to shift gears a little bit because another area of your world and your company centers around helping people and investors with 1031 exchanges. And, a lot of folks who are maybe listening to this are a little bit newer to real estate. Obviously, one of the big things around real estate is there are a significant amount of tax advantages around it. Obviously, our government wants us to own real estate, house people, right? There are incentives tied to real estate. And one of the big ones too is the ability to defer taxes, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
potentially even, there's a strategy buy, borrow, and die where you die with your asset and it gets stepped up and right. And you don't pay the gains on it, right? But throughout life, right, you might want to sell some rental property or if you have an apartment complex and not want to pay the capital gains on it. There are ways to do that and to still continue to have your dollars invested. So, Erika, help our listeners learn a little bit more about 1031 exchanges. What does that mean?
Sure. So I'm not an accountant. I can't give accounting advice, and I'm not an attorney. I can't give legal advice. However, we act as what's called a qualified intermediary. So we sort of act alongside those partners to defer gains on an investment property. It can be any type of investment property. It can be a short house that you've had in the family for years, as long as there's some rent roll coming in. It could be a piece of land that had some rent roll coming in, whether you've rented, AT&T to build a tower or to a trucking company to store their trucks. It could be a multifamily property, it could be a warehouse. So any sort of for investment use only, the federal government allows you to defer capital gains. We like to make sure that the word defer is defined because some people think that it's absolving you of the gains. It does not. It kind of kicks the can down the road until, like you said, the person passes. And then there's a step up in basis. But while you're here and living, you are deferring. And the way that it works is you have to identify another investment property. So after the sale of the asset, the money comes to me, does not go back to the consumer. It has to come to the intermediary. And you have 45 days to identify an asset and then a total of 180 days to on that asset. So that's really kind of the minutia of what we do. We kind of encourage people to know that they want to do an exchange way prior to selling because there's a lot of moving parts finding the new asset, especially in this market where shopping for real estate is really hard. There's a lot of people outbidding you. So we like people to have that conversation even prior to listing the property for sale. My company has conference calls with the accountant and the attorney and the real estate agent. If we get this much money, what is the gains? What's the cost basis? How much are they paying the IRS? And let's make a plan forward.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And to your point, right? We're not, obviously, I'm not giving tax advice. We definitely need to consult our tax experts in here. And this is where you probably go first, right? When you're thinking about selling, right? Erika said you can figure out what your gain would be if you did sell, right?
A lot of questions is is there a tax amount that's just too small to not do a 1031 exchange? Which is a good question. I have seen people enter into a 1031 exchange to save $20,000 in taxes. And I've seen people not do a 1031 exchange and pay $2 million in taxes. So kind of the way that I walk it through when I have these preliminary discussions is what makes you happy, right? I have people that will not pay a cent to the federal government. This is their principle. This is what, puts them to bed at night. They're very excited that Uncle Sam did win $1 from them. And they will 1031 exchange even for what I would consider a small tax bill on a large gain. And then I have people kind of that are okay. I mean, like I said, I had a family that was okay with paying $2 million. I think that that's silly, right? $2 million can go a long way. Tell them, I'm sure, given $2 million, you would figure out a way to make that explode. But that was not what made them happy. So we didn't pressure that exchange.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, this is where, we can, in any shape and size, we can offer our objective advice, but, some people are going to go their own path, right? And I guess the beauty of it all, right? The freedom to choose on these sorts of things. Obviously, I'm very partial to keeping more of my wealth so I can choose how to use it. I think our government, for all its good and bad parts of it, maybe is not as a good steward of money as I would be, I would hope. Right. And so, yeah, but to your point, if for some folks, given certain circumstances, maybe it isn't the right route. But that's why you go to people like you to help you figure out if this is even worthwhile or not.
Yeah, and we have those transparent conversations with people. Some people don't want to be property owners anymore. Some people are just tired of being a landlord. So I kind of understand that. With the like kind exchange too, one of kind of the misnomers that people always say to me is, well, I don't want to be in multifamily anymore. I don't want to exchange like for like. I think I have to exchange a multifamily for another multifamily. And that's incorrect. As long as what like kind is defined by the IRS is it just needs to be real property that's used for rental. So if you were over being a landlord and you had 300 units and you were tired of the plumbing phone calls and collecting rent and you wanted to buy a Walgreens or a CVS and triple net and have that passive income, that is permissible under the exchange. So I always like to clarify that.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. It's much broader than probably people think. And it gets this is why it's so important for people who listen here to get educated on these things before you actually need to know.
Right.
So you have a lot more options at your disposal. This is great. So, as it ties that too, because I think, I often come across people who are maybe looking to diversify in their financial lives. And obviously people hear all the time, a lot of people build wealth in real estate and in different shapes and sizes, right? So, I know there are people looking to get into real estate. You probably work with a lot of different real estate investors, and you yourself too experience with it. Like, what are maybe some things that you think people ought to know before getting into real estate investing and going into this path?
On record, I'm a huge fan of diversification. I think you should dip your toe in a little bit of everything. There are people that I work with that are so pro real estate and have nothing in any sort of 401k or any sort of fund. I don't subscribe to that. I think that it is safest for everyone involved. If you want to take the risk in real estate, that's great. But you should also have other investments, other ways to make money. And money should be working for you everywhere, not just one area. But I know a lot specifically about how real estate money works. So I would say if you're a solo person and you don't really have friends in the space or an investor group that you can kind of ride your coattails, the best place to get started is buying a multifamily house. Buying a 2-family. If you're young, live in one side, rent out the other side. If you're like, no, I've been in my single family for years with my family, I'm not going to do that. That's fine. Get 2 tenants and sort of learn from the ground up on how to manage. It's not glamorous. I lived in a 3-family house and I have tenants. And it sucks to be a landlord sometimes and to hear the tenant partying until 3 a.m. and they've used all the hot water and whatever the case may be. But it's a really good way to go from, having a $4,000 mortgage payment to now a $900 mortgage payment because my tenants sort of carry that bulk of the money. And then that money that you're saving can be in other places. Like I said, I'm a fan of diversifying. So it could be used, to give to your financial planner, to buy more real estate, to go into a private deal. Like there's other ways to use that money. So I would say that as a first timer, the residential multifamily, 2-family is really a nice way to start. I'm not a lender, but I could tell you that there are ways to buy a 2-family house with 3% down, 5% down. That's not a ton of money. That's a good goal for somebody to shoot for. And then, commercially, depending on who your network is, you can get involved in funds and you can get involved in what they call tip deals, tenants in common, where you go in with partners or a joint venture where you go in with partners and you buy a bigger asset. As long as you vet the professionals you're aligning with, you can kind of throw your money and let it ride and watch sort of the first one work. And then from there you'll get, because experience is really what you need in real estate. From there, you'll kind of figure out what marketplaces work, what asset classes you like, what you don't like about it, and then you can kind of go off on your own.
That's great advice. It's wide. Like you just went through a few different options, and that's I guess the beauty and maybe scary part for folks getting into it, because it is pretty diverse. From I remember the days when I first started that the first thing I did was actually loan money. I didn't actually buy a rental property. I'd loan money to an investor who knew better and was willing to share some of his secrets and experience and speed up my life.
Teach you so much, right? So to just be the guy that saved up $100,000 that says, here, let's figure out how it's going to work together. That's invaluable. So I highly suggest partnerships. Also, if you're already a business owner and you don't own the real estate that your business is in, that is bad. You need to invest in a building and pay yourself rent. So, especially restaurateurs, they're very guilty of not owning their own building. And that can put a restaurant under very quickly. You are just opened and you're the newest hotspot in town. Your landlord's going to know that. They're going to jack up your rent. And with rising food costs, that's going to crush you. So I'm a big proponent of, if you are a business owner, you should own the real estate that you work out of.
Yeah. And it's really, really a great recommendation. It's something that certainly have people come across who do that. It's a really great harmonious connection there between, and this is always talk about, and it's maybe the you hit on all three within sort of the same sort of breath, is investing in things that you have a little more ownership and control over. And I always talk about it. It's like learning, right? Personal development. The more you learn, the more valuable you become, and more risks you can mitigate, right? Because you just know more and know more people.
I'm a proponent of hands-on. I have investment groups that are based in Jersey and they are buying in Tennessee and Ohio and places that they don't live. but they've been doing it for years and years and years, and they understand numbers, just numbers. They understand the book, and they understand the cash flow, and they understand the minutia of owning that piece of property. But if you're a first timer, you should not be investing into a house that you cannot see or an asset you cannot see. Really should be boots on the ground, watching it, understanding, not a plane right away. You should be a car right away.
Yeah. So this one, to your point, I mean, getting through it and experiencing, and then you'll see what draws you in, right? Like to your point, if the idea of being a landlord is not your cup of tea, experience it. You might.
So like I get a lot of questions about Airbnb as well. I don't know if you want to shift gears.
Yeah.
Airbnb is interesting. So FHA loans do not allow you to Airbnb. Actually, no loans that are owner occupied technically will allow you to Airbnb. And if they catch you doing it, they could trigger a foreclosure action. So you have to be careful depending on the finances that you use. Also, if you elect to buy a condo, you have to read the bylaws prior to buying the condo. They may want it to be owner occupied for a year, 2 years. They may never allow Airbnbs. Most higher end condos now are cracking down because they don't let the riffraff in one unit and the old rich people in the other unit. It is what it is. So if you're working with a real estate agent, ask for a copy of the bylaws up front, ask them to confirm whether or not you can Airbnb or you're going to buy an asset in Miami and have to just yourself. I also get asked about Picasso. I don't know if you know Picasso. Have you seen the website or seen the commercials for it?
No, tell me about it.
Okay, so Picasso, and I'm not a Picasso ambassador. I get no money from this, but I'll talk to you about it a little bit. Picasso is a way that you can buy part of a piece of real estate. So they're basically putting mini groups together. You have $1 million to spend. Let's find 3 other friends on this website that can go buy a $4 million house together. I get to use it 25% of the time, so on and so forth. I do work with a couple real estate agents that are Picasso representatives that can show estates. It's interesting to me. I've looked at it superficially, but from on the surface, what it seems as you are buying into an LLC. So you have ownership of the LLC, which is problematic from an investment standpoint because you cannot 1031 exchange your portion. If you decided today, you know what, I'm out of this asset and I want to swap Tom in for my 25%, that is a business sale. That's not an exchange for real property. So again, I'm not an accountant, but from a gains perspective, if I buy in for $1 million and all of a sudden Tom's going to take it from me for $2 million, there may be tax consequences there. So I guess that's the pros and cons. But the pro is, that $4 million house that you've always wanted is more obtainable if your buy-in is $1 million and you could just share it with.
Right.
So
right.
It's an interesting model.
No, it's interesting. I definitely have to take a look at it. I mean, it's thinking about, you mentioned a little bit before, whether it be, similar nature, syndication work where people are buying big properties that you couldn't get on your own, right? Because you couldn't, so you're pulling people together to secure an asset and, have a partnership share in it. This sounds like you're like a part of the membership of the LLC. So yeah, maybe similar nature, but definitely something to look into. And this is why it's fun, because you get to kind of see all these different varieties and sort of innovative approaches to it that, you may not ever realize were out there. They wouldn't be sitting in your 401k plan, that's for sure. Right. So this is where, people are starting to expand out and at least explore it a bit. You never know.
There's risk in everything. People are very risk adverse, which don't be crazy with your money. I'm not telling you to put your money out of building and watch it burn. You have to take experiments. You have to I wouldn't say put your whole life savings in Picasso, but if you have some money and you're willing to take the risk and try to get reward, it's a great place to start.
No, it's great advice. Listen, I always use this. It's in one of the books. It was The Psychology of Money. Really great analogy. I always come back to it on occasion is, that barbell mentality of investing. You have a solid handle base of things that you own, you control, have less safety, less risk, really has the foundational pieces of your financial life. But in the barbell is you can swing a little bit harder, right? And maybe get some outsized returns like this. and experiment with money that maybe isn't needed immediately or can be something long term. You don't have to have all the win, right? To be able
Yeah, and I
to
think people, when you hear the horror stories, because everybody pays attention to horror stories, but when you hear the horror stories, those are people that really went all in and they should have known better. And I think people listen to those stories, they all nod their head and go, that person should have known better.
Yeah.
We'll see with the last crypto upset, we saw horror stories at all. Well, that's because they rolled it all in there, right? So, if you've got a piece of money in your savings account and you like to go to the casino and play roulette, okay, cool, throw it all in red and see what happens. It's kind of the same in investing. You should be leveraging your entire home and your grocery bill and you know what I mean? You should be smart about it and risk the pot of money that you feel comfortable. Again, it all goes back to what makes you happy, right? We kind of talked about it in the beginning, like I 1031 exchange people for the amount of money that makes them happy, whatever they want to do. It could be $100,000 house. It could be $100 million portfolio.
That's right. Right. I mean, we can get so in, people in the financial world get so mired into details and rates of return and interest, all this stuff that, most people are just like, it can be boring, but it's back to like, how does that make you feel in life? Why are you doing it? And how does that impact your daily living? I would hate, so I always tell people in real estate, don't get into it. If you're going to keep you up at night, do not touch this thing because that's not worth it. I don't care what kind of return it gives you.
Right. But that's, to me, that's all investments. Like if you're the person that's going to sign into your 401k every day, then you're going to be on the verge of tears. Like and then when there's an upswing, you're going to go out and celebrate and probably spend more money than you should have. So like, don't log in every day, right? Be that investor and I'm not saying take your eye off the ball periodically, but be that person that maybe checks in once a year and is cool. It's all long term.
Long term, yes.
Long term play.
That's exactly the way you think about it and make sure your strategy is appropriate and you kind of deal with the ebbs and flows of investing, right? But you got a solid base and strategy in place. That's awesome. Well, Erika, this was great. Thank you for sharing so much valuable information around title insurance and 1031 exchanges and real estate. Really, really awesome stuff. And we'll definitely see what's new and exciting coming in your world. Anything you'd like to share with the listeners?
New and exciting. Sure. So for anybody that's Jersey based, on the 28th, I'm moderating a luxury panel for a huge real estate event. So I'm excited for that event. And it's been a very busy year. I got a lot of closings coming up, a lot of cash closings with the market rising, actually. So just excited for the end of the year and it just gets crushed it.
That's awesome. Well, Erika, thanks so much for spending some time with us and really love seeing you again. Always good energy. So I appreciate it. And I know our listeners got a lot out of it. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.